The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers when I heard her heels clicking across the concrete floor. I was under the hood of my old Jeep, trying to fix a radiator leak that had been driving me crazy for weeks. The garage smelled like motor oil and disappointment, which seemed fitting for a Tuesday night in November. "Jack." Lila's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "We need to talk." I wiped my hands on a rag and turned around. My wife of 12 years stood in the doorway wearing her best courtroom outfit, the navy blue suit that meant business. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore when she was about to destroy someone's life in depositions. "Let me guess," I said, tossing the rag onto my workbench. "The dishwasher is making that noise again?" She stepped into the garage, her designer heels making sharp sounds against the concrete. "Jack, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to listen carefully." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I'd heard that voice before, in court recordings she'd brought home, right before she demolished opposing witnesses. "You'll be sleeping in the garage tonight," she said, crossing her arms. "My new boyfriend is coming over, and I don't want any awkwardness." The words hung in the air like exhaust fumes. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. "You're what now?" "Chase will be staying the night. I've already made up the couch for you out here. There are blankets in the storage cabinet." I set down the wrench I'd been holding, my mind scrambling to process what she'd just said. "Lila, what the hell are you talking about? New boyfriend?" She sighed like I was being deliberately obtuse. "Jack, let's not pretend this marriage has been working. We've been roommates for years. I've found someone who actually appreciates me." "Appreciates you?" The garage suddenly felt too small, too hot. "I've been busting my rear end for 12 years, working double shifts so you could go to law school, fixing up this house with my own hands." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "And I'm grateful for all of that," she interrupted, checking her watch. "But gratitude isn't love, Jack. Chase makes me feel alive again." Chase. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew exactly who she meant. The pretty boy personal trainer from her gym, all muscles and teeth and Instagram followers. I'd met him at the company Christmas party last year, where he'd spent 20 minutes explaining his supplement routine, while I nodded and wondered how someone could be so enthusiastic about protein powder. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You're kicking me out of my own bedroom so you can entertain your boyfriend?" "It's just for tonight. We can discuss the details tomorrow." "Details of what?" She smoothed down her skirt, avoiding my eyes. "The separation, Jack. The divorce proceedings. Chase has offered to help you move your things out this weekend." The garage started spinning slightly. I gripped the edge of my workbench, feeling like I'd been sucker punched by someone I'd never seen coming. "How long?" I managed to ask. "How long what? How long have you been seeing him?" She glanced at her phone. "That's not really relevant now, is it? Chase will be here in an hour, so if you could just—" "How long, Lila?" Something in my voice made her look up. For a second, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married. Uncertain, almost guilty. Then her lawyer mask slipped back into place. 3 months, she said quietly. 3 months. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to pay for her new car, she'd been playing house with a guy who probably couldn't spell mortgage if his life depended on it. "I see." I turned back to the Jeep, picking up my wrench. "Well, thanks for the heads up. Jack, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I laughed, but it came out wrong, too sharp, too bitter. "Harder? Lila, you just told me I'm sleeping in the garage while your boyfriend takes my place in our bed. I'm not sure how this could get much harder." "It doesn't have to be like this. If you're reasonable about the divorce, we can keep things civil." I turned around slowly. "Civil?" "For Zach's sake, if nothing else. Our son." 17 years old and away at his first semester of college, probably studying for midterms while his mother was blowing up his family. The thought of having to explain this to him made my chest tight. Does Zach know about Chase? I'll tell him when the time is right. When will that be? When Chase is wearing my robe at Christmas dinner? Lila's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled, actually smiled, at whatever message she'd received. He's running a few minutes late, she said, typing back quickly. Jack, I know this is a shock, but you'll understand eventually. We both deserve to be happy. Happy, I repeated. Right. She headed for the door, then paused. There's leftover pizza in the fridge if you're hungry. And Jack, try to keep the noise down out here. Some of us have early meetings tomorrow. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with my broken radiator and the wreckage of my marriage. I stood there for a long time, listening to the house settling around me. Somewhere above, I could hear Lila moving around, probably changing into something more comfortable for her guest. The thought made my stomach turn. My phone buzzed. A text from my buddy Eddie, who owned a bar downtown. Drink later? I started to type back, rain check, then deleted it. Instead, I wrote, maybe. Weird night. Everything okay? I stared at the screen, trying to figure out how to explain that my wife had just evicted me from my own bedroom. Finally, I typed, Lila's got company coming over, sleeping in the garage tonight. The response came back immediately. What kind of company? The kind that wears my cologne and drives a better car than me. Jesus, Jack, come to the bar. Rita's working tonight. She'll pour you something strong. I almost said yes. The idea of drowning this whole nightmare in whiskey sounded pretty appealing, but something held me back. Maybe pride, maybe stubbornness, maybe just the need to see this through. Thanks, but I think I'll stick around. See how this plays out. Your funeral, buddy. 20 minutes later, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the garage window, I watched Chase climb out of his black Range Rover, carrying a bottle of wine and an overnight bag. An overnight bag. Like he was moving in already. He knocked on the front door, and I heard Lila's voice calling out, Coming! In a tone I hadn't heard her use with me in years. Light, happy, excited. The door opened, and I caught a glimpse of them embracing before I looked away. Some things you can't unsee, and I was already going to have enough trouble sleeping tonight without adding that image to the collection. I went back to working on the Jeep, cranking up the radio to drown out whatever was happening in the house. But even with the music playing, I could hear them laughing together, their voices carrying through the walls like echoes of everything I'd apparently lost without realizing it. Around midnight, the house went quiet. I made myself a bed on the old couch I kept in the garage for when I needed to take breaks from working on projects. The cushions smelled like motor oil and were about as comfortable as sleeping on concrete, but I'd endured worse during my Navy days. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house creak and settle around me. Somewhere above, my wife was sharing our bed with another man, and I was camping out in my own garage like some kind of refugee from my own life. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, though that stung plenty. The worst part was how matter-of-fact she'd been about it, like she was announcing a change in our cable package instead of the end of our marriage. Like I was just another item on her to-do list, something to be handled efficiently and moved past. My phone buzzed again. Another text, but this one wasn't from Eddie. It was from Lila. Thanks for being understanding about this. We'll talk more tomorrow. Understanding. That was rich. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, Sure thing. Sleep well. But I didn't hit send. Instead, I deleted the message and put the phone aside. If Lila wanted understanding, she was going to have to look elsewhere. I was fresh out. I woke up to the sound of the coffee maker grinding beans in the kitchen above. My neck felt like I'd been wrestling with a crowbar all night, and every muscle in my back was screaming complaints about the couch. The garage was cold, filled with that damp November chill that seeps into your bones and stays there. Through the thin walls, I could hear voices, Lila's laugh mixing with a deeper rumble that definitely wasn't mine. They were having breakfast together, in my kitchen, at my table. I checked my phone, 6:47 a.m., 3 missed calls from Eddie, 2 texts asking if I was still alive, and 1 message from my business partner reminding me about the Henderson house inspection at 9. Right. Work. The world keeps spinning even when your personal life implodes. I gathered my clothes and headed for the side door, planning to sneak into the house for a shower. But as I reached for the handle, the kitchen door swung open and Chase appeared, wearing nothing but boxer shorts and a smug expression. "Morning, Jack," he said like we were old buddies meeting for coffee. "Lila said you might need to grab some things." He was younger than me by at least 5 years, with the kind of sculpted physique that comes from spending 4 hours a day at the gym and taking photos of yourself doing it. His hair was perfectly tousled in that expensive, casual way, and he had the confident smile of someone who'd never had to worry about a mortgage payment. "Just need a shower," I said, keeping my voice level. Sure. No problem." He stepped aside, but not quite enough, forcing me to squeeze past him. "Hey, thanks for being so cool about this whole thing. Lila was worried you might make it weird." Make it weird. The guy was standing in my kitchen in his underwear, and I was the one who might make things weird. "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. In the shower, I let the hot water run over my aching shoulders and tried to make sense of the situation. 3 months, Lila had said. 3 months of sneaking around, of lying to my face, of making plans behind my back. How many times had she come home from the gym glowing with what I'd assumed was endorphins? How many late nights at the office had actually been spent with him? When I came out of the bathroom, they were both in the kitchen. Lila had made pancakes, something she hadn't done for me in years, and Chase was sitting at the head of the table. My spot. "Morning, Jack," Lila said, without looking up from her plate. She was wearing a silk robe I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." "Thanks, but I need to get to work." "Oh, that's right. You have that inspection today." She glanced at Chase. "Jack's a home inspector. He crawls around in people's attics and basements looking for problems." The way she said it made it sound like I spent my days playing in dirt instead of running a successful business that had paid for this house, her car, and her law school education. "That's cool, man," Chase said, cutting into his pancakes. "I bet you see some crazy stuff, like foundation issues and whatnot." Foundation issues? Yeah, I was becoming an expert on those. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, but Lila's voice stopped me. "Jack, we really do need to talk later, about the logistics of everything." Logistics. Like our marriage was a business merger gone wrong. "I'll be home around 6, I said. "Actually, Chase and I have dinner plans tonight, maybe tomorrow?" I turned around slowly. Dinner plans. That new Italian place downtown. Chase knows the owner. Of course he did. Chase probably knew everyone, the kind of guy who got tables without reservations and never waited in line. "Have fun," I said, and walked out before I could say something I'd regret. The Henderson inspection was routine. A young couple buying their first house, nervous about every creak and stain. I went through the motions, checking electrical panels and testing water pressure, but my mind kept drifting back to the scene in my kitchen. Chase sitting in my chair, eating pancakes off my plates, making himself at home in my life. Around noon, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages, Facebook alerts, missed calls. I ignored them until Mrs. Henderson asked if everything was okay. "Sorry," I said, pulling out my phone. "Let me just check this." The first text was from my neighbor, Mrs. Forsyth. "Jack, honey, I hope you're doing okay. If you need anything." The second was from Eddie. "Rita saw the Facebook post. You need to call me. Now." Facebook post? I opened the app and immediately wished I hadn't. Lila had updated her relationship status. In a relationship with Chase Braddock. The post had been up for 2 hours and already had 37 likes and a dozen comments, mostly from her lawyer friends and gym buddies. So happy for you, girl. Chase is such a catch. You deserve this happiness. I scrolled through the comments, feeling like I was watching my life get dissected in real time. Then I saw one that made my stomach drop. What happened to Jack? Weren't you guys married? Lila had replied, sometimes people grow apart. Jack and I are handling this maturely, and I hope our friends can respect our privacy during this transition. Maturely. She'd blindsided me with a boyfriend and kicked me out of my bedroom, and now she was spinning it like we'd had some mutual, amicable decision to part ways. My phone rang. Eddie. Jack, please tell me you're not seeing what I'm seeing. Depends what you're seeing. Your wife just announced to the entire world that she's dating some pretty boy trainer. Meanwhile, half the town is asking where the hell you are. I finished up the inspection in a daze, barely remembering to give the Hendersons my report. All I could think about was that Facebook post, the casual way Lila had erased 12 years of marriage with a status update. By the time I got home, Chase's Range Rover was gone, but there was a note on the kitchen counter in Lila's handwriting. Jack, gone to dinner and a movie. We need to discuss the house and finances soon. Also, could you please not leave your work clothes in the bathroom? Chase noticed the smell. Thanks. L. The smell. My work clothes smelled like honest labor, like crawling through basements and attics, to make sure families weren't buying houses that would fall down around them. But apparently that was offensive to Chase's delicate sensibilities. I crumpled up the note and tossed it in the trash. Then I opened my laptop and started doing something I probably should have done months ago. I started paying attention. Lila's social media was a revelation. Photos of her at restaurants I'd never been to, group shots with friends I barely recognized, check-ins at places around town during times when she'd told me she was working late. And there, in the background of a photo from 6 weeks ago, was Chase. Just a glimpse of him at a table across the restaurant, but definitely him. I kept scrolling, building a timeline of lies and deception that stretched back further than 3 months. Way further. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey Jack, this is Rita from Eddie's bar. Heard you're going through a rough patch. If you need someone to talk to who isn't a guy, I'm around. Also, your wife's boyfriend came in last week bragging about his upgrade. Thought you should know. An upgrade. That's what I was being replaced with. A newer, shinier model with better abs and fewer responsibilities. I poured myself a drink and sat down at the kitchen table, looking around at the house I'd spent 5 years renovating. I'd stripped wallpaper, refinished floors, updated electrical, replumbed the bathrooms. Every room had something I'd fixed or improved with my own hands. And now Lila wanted to discuss logistics. Probably wanted me to sign papers, divide assets, make this whole thing as clean and painless as possible. For her. My phone rang again. This time it was Zach, calling from college. Dad, I just saw Mom's Facebook. What's going on? I closed my eyes, trying to figure out how to explain this to my son. It's complicated, buddy. Are you guys getting divorced? Looks that way. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, Dad. This sucks. Yeah, it does. But don't worry about us, okay? Focus on your studies. We'll figure this out. Is it true she's dating someone else? I looked out the window at the driveway where Chase's car had been parked that morning. Yeah, it's true. That's messed up, Dad. Really messed up. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house, surrounded by all the things I'd built and fixed and cared for, and realized something important. I wasn't going anywhere. This was my house, my life, my investment. If Lila wanted a divorce, fine. But she was going to have to work a lot harder than a Facebook post and some pancakes to push me out of the picture. I opened my laptop and started making some calls. If she wanted to play games, I could play games too. But I'd been underestimated before, and that usually worked out pretty well for me. Time to remind everyone exactly who they were dealing with. I spent the next morning doing what I do best, investigating. 20 years as a home inspector teaches you to look for problems that aren't immediately visible, to spot the cracks behind fresh paint and the rot underneath pretty facades. Chase Braddock, it turned out, had plenty of both. A quick search of public records showed 3 address changes in the past 2 years, 2 small claims court cases for unpaid rent, and a bankruptcy filing from 18 months ago. His Instagram account painted a picture of success: expensive restaurants, luxury gym equipment, motivational quotes about living your best life. But the reality was messier. I was scrolling through his business registration when my phone rang. "Eddie, please tell me you're not sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself. I'm conducting research." "Research into what? How to ruin yourself in your garage?" I closed the laptop. "Research into my wife's boyfriend. Did you know he's been evicted twice in the past 3 years? Jack, listen to me. You need to get out of that house, come down to the bar, have a normal conversation with normal people, and stop stalking your replacement on the internet." "I'm not stalking anyone. I'm being thorough." Eddie sighed. "Rita wants to talk to you. Says she's got information you need to hear." An hour later, I was sitting at the bar, nursing a beer and listening to Rita explain why Chase had caught her attention. "He came in here 3 weeks ago with some blonde who wasn't your wife," she said, wiping down glasses with quick, efficient movements. "Bragging about how he was trading up from his current situation. Said he had his eye on a lawyer with a nice house and no prenup." No prenup. That detail hit me like a slap. Lila had been the one to suggest we skip the prenuptial agreement when we got married. "It's not romantic," she'd said. "It's like planning for failure." "You sure it was him?" Rita pulled out her phone and showed me a photo she'd taken discreetly. Chase, definitely, with his arm around a brunette who looked barely old enough to drink. "I take pictures of troublemakers," she said. "Helps with the insurance claims when they trash the place." I stared at the photo. "When did you say this was?" 3 weeks ago, right around the time your wife started posting all those gym selfies." The timeline was starting to make sense. Chase wasn't just cheating on whatever relationship he'd had before Lila. He was a serial opportunist, moving from one situation to the next, like a parasite looking for a better host. "There's more," Rita said. "He paid his tab with a credit card that got declined. Had to call someone to come down and cover it. Some older woman who looked pretty annoyed about the whole thing." I finished my beer and thanked Rita for the information. Back home, I found Lila in the kitchen, packing what looked like a picnic lunch. "Going somewhere nice?" I asked. She glanced up, startled. "Chase is taking me to that new winery outside town. We're making a day of it." "Sounds expensive. He likes to spoil me." She folded a cloth napkin with careful precision. "Jack, we really do need to have that conversation soon. About dividing things up." "What kinds of things?" "The house, obviously. The cars. Our savings accounts." She paused, not meeting my eyes. "My lawyer says the process can be pretty straightforward if we're both reasonable." Her lawyer. Of course she already had representation. "And what does reasonable look like?" "Well, I'd probably keep the house since my income is more stable. You could take your truck and your tools, maybe half of the savings. We'd split Zach's college expenses." I leaned against the counter, watching her pack gourmet cheese and crackers into a wicker basket. "That's generous of you." "I'm trying to be fair, Jack. I know this isn't easy." "You know what's not easy? Finding out your wife has been planning your replacement for months while pretending everything was fine." She stopped packing and looked at me directly for the first time in days. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been doing some math, Lila. 3 months of dating doesn't usually lead to overnight bags and house keys. This has been going on a lot longer than you admitted." "I don't know what you're trying to imply." "I'm not implying anything. I'm saying it outright. You've been lying to me about the timeline, about the relationship, probably about a lot of other things." Her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and smiled, that same automatic response I'd seen yesterday. "Chase is here," she said, shouldering the picnic basket. "We'll finish this conversation later." "Will we?" Because it seems like you've already finished it for both of us. She paused at the door. Jack, I know you're hurt, but don't make this uglier than it needs to be. We can both walk away from this with our dignity intact. After she left, I sat in the quiet kitchen and thought about dignity. About 12 years of marriage reduced to a property division and a social media announcement. About sleeping in my garage while another man took my place. Then I thought about Chase's financial troubles, his history of moving from one relationship to the next, his apparent talent for finding women who could support his lifestyle. And I realized Lila was right about one thing. This didn't have to get ugly, but it was definitely going to get interesting. I opened my laptop and started making a list, not of assets to divide or lawyers to call, but of facts to verify and stories to check. If Chase wanted to play the long game, he was about to discover that I'd been playing it longer and better than he could imagine. My phone buzzed with a text from Rita. Forgot to mention, your boy Chase has been asking around about you. Wants to know about your finances, your business, stuff like that. Thought you should know someone's doing homework. I smiled for the first time in days. Let him do his homework. I'd been studying this particular subject a lot longer than he had, and I was about to teach him a few things they didn't cover in personal trainer certification courses. The game was just getting started. The winery photos showed up on Lila's Instagram that evening, her and Chase looking perfectly happy among the autumn vines, sharing cheese and wine, and gazing into each other's eyes like something out of a romantic movie. The comments were predictable. So cute! You two are perfect together. Living your best life. What the comments didn't show was the credit card Chase had tried to use to pay for their romantic afternoon, the one that got declined, according to the server who happened to be Eddie's cousin. Lila had covered the bill, along with the tip, while Chase made apologetic noises about a banking error. I was learning that Chase's life was full of banking errors. Monday morning brought my first real opportunity to test what I'd discovered. I was inspecting a house 2 blocks from Chase's gym when I saw him through the window, leading a training session with an older woman who was trying way too hard to keep up with his routine. I finished the inspection early and stopped by the gym's front desk. I'm thinking about joining, I told the receptionist, a young guy with arms like tree trunks. Can you tell me about Chase Braddock's training packages? Chase? The kid's expression shifted slightly. He's really popular, but his premium packages are pretty expensive. How expensive? $200 an hour for private sessions, but between you and me, you might want to wait a few weeks before signing up. Why's that? The kid glanced around, then leaned closer. There's been some questions about his certifications. Management's looking into it. Interesting. I thanked him and headed home, where I found Lila in the kitchen with paperwork spread across the table. Divorce papers? I asked. Preliminary asset worksheets, she said without looking up. We need to list everything we own jointly. I sat down across from her, noting how she'd already filled in most of the sections. Our house, valued at what seemed like a conservative estimate. Our cars, my truck listed as minimal value, her sedan at full Kelly Blue Book. Our savings accounts, retirement funds, even my tools and equipment. You've been busy. I want to get this done efficiently, for both our sakes. I picked up one of the sheets, scanning the numbers. You've got my business listed as sole proprietorship, minimal assets. That's not quite accurate. What do you mean? I mean, I've got contracts lined up through next spring, a client base I've been building for 15 years, and equipment worth more than both our cars combined. She looked up from her paperwork. Jack, let's not overcomplicate this. I'm not overcomplicating anything. I'm just making sure the numbers are accurate. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken of Chase's declined credit card receipt, the one Rita had managed to get from her bartender friend who also worked weekends at the winery. Speaking of accuracy, how much money have you been spending on your boyfriend? Her face went pale. Where did you get that? Does it matter? The question is whether you've been using our joint accounts to finance your relationship. That's ridiculous. I pulled up our bank statements on my phone, scrolling through 3 months of charges I'd been too trusting to question before. Expensive restaurants on nights she'd claimed to be working late. Shopping trips to stores she'd never mentioned. Cash withdrawals that didn't match any expenses I could identify. $4,000, I said, showing her the total. That's what you've spent on Chase in the past 3 months, using money from our joint account. Those weren't all for him. The wine country trip was $600. The dinner at that steakhouse downtown was $350. The shopping trip to buy him that leather jacket was $400. I set the phone down. Want me to keep going? Lila's lawyer mask was slipping. Jack, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been using our marriage as a bank account to fund your affair. It wasn't an affair. What would you call it? She gathered up the paperwork, her hands shaking slightly. I call it moving on with my life, something you should consider doing. Oh, I'm moving on, just not in the direction you expected. That evening, I got a call from Chase himself. Jack, hey, it's Chase. We should probably talk. Should we? Look, I know this situation is awkward for everyone. Lila's worried you're not handling things well. I leaned back in my garage chair, feet up on my workbench. What gave her that impression? She mentioned you've been asking questions about our relationship, looking into personal stuff that's not really your business anymore. Personal stuff like your financial history? There was a pause. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm curious about how a guy who filed for bankruptcy 18 months ago can afford to take my wife to expensive restaurants every weekend. Another pause, longer this time. I think you've got some bad information, buddy. Do I? Because I've got credit reports, court filings, and receipts that tell a pretty clear story. Jack, look, I get that you're upset. But you need to accept that Lila's made her choice. She's with me now, and we're happy. Don't make this harder on yourself by digging into stuff that doesn't concern you. Here's what concerns me, Chase. My wife has been spending thousands of dollars of our joint money on a guy who can't afford his own rent. That makes it my business. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. The question is whether Lila knows what she's gotten herself into. I hung up before he could respond. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Lila. We need to talk. Now. She was waiting in the kitchen when I came inside, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. What did you say to Chase? I told him the truth, that he's been living off our marriage while pretending to be successful. You had no right. I had every right. You've been spending our money on him for months. Money I earned crawling through basements and attics while you were playing house with your trainer. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Lila? Because from where I stand, it looks like you found yourself a very expensive hobby. She stopped pacing and faced me directly. Chase is not a hobby. I love him. You love the idea of him, the Instagram version, the gym fantasy, but you don't know him at all. I know him better than you think. Do you know he's been asking around town about my finances, about our assets? Do you know he tried to use a fake credit card at that winery and you had to cover for him? Her expression flickered. Just for a second, but long enough for me to see the doubt creeping in. You're lying. Am I? Ask him about the brunette he was with at Eddie's bar 3 weeks ago. Ask him about the eviction notices. Ask him why his personal training certification expired 6 months ago and he never renewed it. I headed for the garage, leaving her standing in the kitchen with questions she probably didn't want answered, but I was betting she'd ask them anyway. I woke up Tuesday morning to the sound of raised voices coming from the kitchen. Through the thin wall, I could hear Lila and Chase having what sounded like their first real argument. Told me you owned your own business. Never said that exactly. I said I was an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur? You're a personal trainer with expired certifications. I smiled and made myself a cup of coffee on the hot plate I'd set up in the garage. Nothing like starting the day with a little validation. The argument continued for another 20 minutes before Chase's Range Rover roared out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. I gave Lila a few minutes to cool down before heading inside for a shower. She was sitting at the kitchen table, still in her robe, staring at her phone. "Morning," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Did you know his car is leased?" I had my suspicions. He told me he owned it, said he'd paid cash. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and sat down across from her. "What else did you find out?" "His apartment is month to month because he can't qualify for a real lease. He owes money to 3 different gyms. And that brunette you mentioned, she's not an ex-girlfriend." "Current?" "Current something. I'm not sure what." She rubbed her temples. "Jack, I think I've made a terrible mistake." It was the first time she'd used my name without sounding like she was addressing a subordinate. I waited for her to continue. "I thought he was different. Confident, successful, exciting. Everything I felt like our marriage wasn't giving me anymore. And now? Now I'm wondering if I threw away 12 years for a guy who can't even afford his own gym membership." I sipped my coffee, watching her process the reality of what she'd discovered. Part of me wanted to gloat, to point out how thoroughly she'd been played. But a bigger part, the part that had loved her for 12 years, just felt sad. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know." She looked around the kitchen, taking in the hand-painted cabinets I'd spent 3 weekends refinishing, the tile backsplash we'd picked out together, the breakfast nook where we'd shared thousands of morning conversations before everything went wrong. "I've made such a mess of things." My phone rang before I could respond. Eddie. "Jack, you need to get down here, now." "What's wrong?" "Just get down here, and bring your camera." I found Eddie standing outside his bar with Rita and 2 other people I didn't recognize, a middle-aged woman and a guy about my age wearing a suit. "Jack, meet Detective Morrison," Eddie said. "And this is Mrs. Patricia Henley." The woman stepped forward, her face tight with anger. "Are you Jack Sawyer, the one married to the lawyer?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then you need to know what your wife's boyfriend has been up to." Detective Morrison opened a folder and showed me a series of photographs. Chase, with different women at different locations around town. Mrs. Henley, the brunette from Rita's photo, and 2 others I didn't recognize. "Mr. Braddock has been running what we call a romance scam," Morrison explained. "He targets successful women, builds relationships, gains access to their finances, then disappears when the money runs out." Mrs. Henley crossed her arms. "He took me for $8,000 over 2 months. Promised he was going to invest it in his fitness business. I never saw a penny back." "How many victims?" I asked. "At least 4 that we know of. Probably more who haven't come forward yet." Morrison closed the folder. "We've been building a case, but we need more evidence. Financial records, communications, anything that shows a pattern of deception." I thought about Lila sitting in our kitchen, finally understanding what she'd gotten herself into. I might be able to help with that. An hour later, I was back home with a plan that felt like justice and revenge rolled into one neat package. Lila was still at the kitchen table, but now she had her laptop open and papers scattered everywhere. "What's all this?" I asked. "Bank statements, credit card bills. I'm trying to figure out how much money I've spent on him." She looked up with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "It's worse than you said. Much worse." "How much worse?" $7,000. Maybe 8. And that's just what I can find records for. I sat down and told her about my conversation with Detective Morrison, watching her face cycle through disbelief, horror, and finally a cold fury I hadn't seen since her courtroom days. "He's a criminal," she said flatly. A criminal who's been using our marriage as his personal ATM. She closed the laptop with a sharp click. What do we do? We. It was the first time she'd used that word in months. We help the police build their case, and then we make sure he never gets the chance to do this to anyone else. What about us, Jack? What about our marriage? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since this whole mess started. She looked smaller somehow, less sure of herself, like the confident lawyer mask had finally slipped away completely. I don't know, I said honestly. You broke something when you brought him into our house. I'm not sure it can be fixed. But you're willing to help me anyway? I'm willing to help make sure he faces consequences for what he's done. To you, to me, to all those other women. After that? I shrugged. We'll see. She nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? First, we gather every piece of evidence you have. Every receipt, every text message, every photo. Then we call Detective Morrison. And then? I smiled for the first time in days. Then we give Chase Braddock exactly what he deserves. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife's lawyer called. Says you're harassing me. Back off or there will be consequences. I showed the message to Lila. She read it twice, then looked up at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes for months. Respect. He has no idea who he's messing with, does he? No, I said, already planning my next move. He really doesn't. Chase made his first mistake by threatening me over text. His second mistake was underestimating what a home inspector learns about gathering evidence and building airtight cases. His third mistake was coming to my house uninvited. I was in the garage Wednesday evening, organizing the evidence Lila and I had compiled for Detective Morrison, when I heard his Range Rover pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him get out and stride toward the front door like he owned the place. I beat him there. Evening, Chase. Little late for a social call, isn't it? He was dressed in his gym clothes, all tight fabric and aggressive posture. We need to talk, Jack, man to man. Do we? Because I thought we covered everything in our last conversation. You've been spreading lies about me around town, talking to cops, asking questions, trying to make me look bad. I leaned against the doorframe, blocking his path inside. I haven't had to make you look bad, Chase. You've done that all by yourself. I don't know what you think you know. I know you've been running romance scams on women across 3 counties. I know you owe back rent on 2 different apartments. I know your personal training certification expired, your business license was revoked, and you've got outstanding warrants in 2 states. His face went pale. That's not true. Which part? Because I've got documentation for all of it. Behind him, I saw Lila's car turn into the driveway. She'd been meeting with Detective Morrison, providing her financial records and testimony. From the look on her face as she got out of the car, the meeting hadn't gone well for Chase. Lila, Chase called out, relief evident in his voice. Tell him to stop harassing me. She walked past him without a word, stopping beside me in the doorway. Chase, you need to leave, she said quietly. Babe, what's wrong? What did they tell you? They told me about Patricia Henley and Michelle Rodriguez and Sarah Chen. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. They told me about the other women you've been seeing while you were with me. Those are lies. They showed me photos, Chase, time-stamped photos of you with other women on the same days you were telling me you loved me. He stepped toward her, and I moved to block his path. I think you should leave now. This is between me and Lila. No, it's not. Not anymore. For a moment, I thought he might try to push past me. He was younger, probably stronger, definitely more desperate. But he was also smart enough to know that assaulting someone on their own property while under police investigation would be a career-ending move. This isn't over, he said, backing toward his car. Yes, it is, Lila called after him. Don't call me, don't text me, don't come here again. He drove off with another squeal of tires, leaving us standing in the doorway like survivors of a storm. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, but tears were starting to form in her eyes. "The detective said I'm not the first wife he's targeted. He specifically looks for married women going through rough patches. How did he know we were having problems? Nicole," the name came out like a curse. "She's been going to his gym for months. She told him about our marriage, about my schedule, about our finances." Nicole Archer, Lila's best friend and confidant, the woman who'd been encouraging Lila to live a little and find someone who appreciates you. I'd never liked Nicole, but I'd never suspected she was actively sabotaging our marriage. "She set you up?" "She introduced us at the gym. Said she thought we'd hit it off. I thought she was being a good friend, trying to help me feel better about myself." We went inside and sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of Chase's deception. Bank statements, credit reports, police files, the paper trail of a man who made his living destroying other people's lives. "Jack, I owe you an apology," Lila said finally. "A big one." "For which part?" "All of it. For believing his lies, for spending our money on him, for kicking you out of your own bedroom while I played house with a criminal." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "For throwing away 12 years of marriage for someone who saw me as nothing but a mark." I looked around our kitchen, the room where we'd planned our future, argued about bills, celebrated Zach's achievements, and made 1,000 small decisions that had built our life together. It felt different now, like we were seeing it clearly for the first time in months. "What happens now?" I asked. "Detective Morrison says they have enough evidence to arrest him. The financial crimes, the fraud charges, the outstanding warrants. He's looking at serious prison time." I meant what happens with us. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "I don't know if I have the right to ask for another chance." "You don't, but you can ask anyway." "I want to try to fix this, Jack. I want to fix us, but I understand if you can't forgive me." I thought about the past week, the anger, the humiliation, the nights in the garage wondering how I'd failed so completely as a husband. But I also thought about the woman sitting across from me, the one I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago, the one who'd been manipulated and used just as much as I had. "It's going to take time," I said finally. "And it's going to take work. Real work." "I know. And you're sleeping in the guest room until we figure this out." She actually smiled at that. "Fair enough." My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison. "Braddock arrested an hour ago. 3 outstanding warrants, plus new charges based on evidence you and your wife provided. Thanks for your help." I showed the message to Lila. She read it twice, then looked up at me with something that might have been hope. "Is it really over?" "The criminal part is. The rest—" I shrugged. "We'll have to see." Later that evening, after Lila had gone to bed in the guest room and I'd returned to my temporary setup in the garage, I sat looking at the house I'd spent years improving. Tomorrow, I'd move back into my own bedroom. Tomorrow, we'd start the long process of figuring out whether our marriage could be repaired or if too much damage had been done. But tonight, for the first time in a week, I felt like I was home. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Eddie. "Heard they got him. You and Lila okay?" I typed back, "Getting there. Thanks for having my back." That's what friends are for. See you tomorrow? I looked through the garage window at the house where my wife was sleeping alone, probably wondering if she'd destroyed the best thing in her life for a man who'd never cared about her at all. "Yeah," I typed. "I'll be there." Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's rebuilding what they tried to take away from you, stronger than it was before. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to do both.